Welcome back, all you beautiful boys and girls. I'm so glad you decided to join me here today for another Far Cry New Dawn video. Today's video is going to be a before you buy. The reason I'm making this video is because I've seen a lot of people talking about how they don't want to buy the game until they know a little bit more about it. Here's some reviews. And that's normal today. People are going away from a pre-order society to a let some other people play it first, see if it's good, then pay my money. Which is probably good. It's going to hold game developers accountable for their games and make sure that we're getting quality games and we're paying money for games that are actually worth it. So I wanted to give a short review. I haven't finished the game yet, so this isn't a total review, but I'm hoping this will be enough of a review to tell you guys whether this game is worth your $40 or not. Getting into it though, I do want to say that there will be no spoilers in this video, so if you're worried about that, don't. I am going to talk about some gameplay mechanics and things like that, so I don't really consider those spoilers. I will be talking about nothing that has to do with the story except for just a few tiny little details that have to do with the gameplay mechanics, but they will not ruin your story. And honestly, if you watch the trailers, you know about these few gameplay mechanics I'm going to be talking about anyway, so I don't consider them spoilers either. Getting into it though, let's talk about first the question on everybody's mind. How does this play compared to Far Cry 5? Is this as good as Far Cry 5? I will say that this game plays a lot like Far Cry 5, but also plays very differently from Far Cry 5. When you're roaming around the free world, it's very similar to Far Cry 5. You have enemies just kind of everywhere. You have objectives you can take on, small objectives like prisoner vehicles, and you can loot enemy trucks for supplies and things like that. So those gameplay mechanics are still there. It does play very much like Far Cry 5 when you're roaming around the free world. But that's where the similarities sort of end. There are some other smaller similarities gameplay-wise, but overall, Far Cry New Dawn plays differently when you're talking about the overall gameplay, not just like the roaming around the free world. And what I mean by that is it feels very RPG-y. Far Cry 5 was still a linear-based story gameplay, even with the player character being silent and you being able to choose what the player character looks like. That was only an RPG aspect. New Dawn is honestly an RPG game. It is a role-playing game. It's less of that story-based linear type gameplay where you're just playing the game to experience a story. An example of this is how in Far Cry 5, when you completed missions, you got, of course, resistance points, which, when you got a total of them, you got to have a boss battle and fight one of the heralds. In New Dawn, everything you do earns you strength. It earns you resources to craft better weapons, to increase the level of prosperity, which is the player home, I guess you could call it, and things like that. They strengthen you instead of just you have to do so many missions before you can face the boss. It's no longer like that. You still have to do an amount of these missions to achieve things and unlock things you need to continue the story, but you get to choose where you spend your resources. You get to choose what things you want to upgrade first, and that will change how you play the game, and that's why it makes it more of an RPG than it is a story game anymore. I'm not saying it's bad though. I'm not saying this RPG aspect added to the Far Cry series is necessarily a bad thing. I will say, however, that there are a lot of devout Far Cry fans who played the games because they were story-based games and they enjoyed the stories told in these games. I do believe the story is still there, just the gameplay mechanics, the fighting, the things like that have changed in a different way. And then they've kind of mushed that all together with the story. It's not a total RPG. It's not a Fallout. It's not an Elder Scrolls. It's not a complete RPG, but the gameplay side of it is very much RPG, while the main storyline is still a story-based linear story. That's gonna blend well in some areas and not very well in others. I think this game is definitely a bit more of an experiment for Ubisoft than previous games have been, and I think that's part of the reason for the $40 price tag, even though it seems to be a full game. I've played quite a while now. I've probably logged 6 hours since it released about 36 hours ago for me. And I'm not very far through the game yet. I am just kind of getting started and getting a good foothold on the game to where I can just kind of go into the story now. I understand all the game mechanics, I've learned all that, and it is a large game. And for $40, when you're thinking of amount of gameplay, it's all there. But quality of gameplay, in some places it's great, some places it's not. An example of it not being great is the weapon system, in my opinion, in New Dawn is garbage. So let me basically explain this shortly here. There are 4 tiers of weapons, and each tier of weapon is good on that tier of enemy. So a tier 1 weapon is good against tier 1 enemies. A tier 1 weapon is going to have a much harder time and do less damage to a tier 2 enemy. And the further in the game you get, of course, the harder the enemies get and the stronger the weapons you get. Now, that's not my biggest complaint. My biggest complaint is the fact that weapon customization is out the window. You buy a gun in this game, you get that gun. If it has a suppressor on it, it always has a suppressor on it. If it has a sight on it, it always has a sight on it. I loved the weapon customization in Far Cry 5. Mainly for 2 reasons. Number 1, every gun was good until the end of the game. You could grab the ARC, which was the first rifle you got, and you could use that to the very last mission and still do decently with it, even though there are better weapons. Every weapon was a viable weapon. That's not true at all in New Dawn. When you get to the point where you're facing enemies that are tier higher than your weapon, they turn into bullet sponges. They're taking no damage, they have double the health, and you can just shoot them and shoot them and shoot them, and it takes forever just to take one enemy down. And I don't enjoy that aspect of this gameplay, I'm gonna be honest. And I don't enjoy the not being able to put different sights on my weapons and customize them the way I felt comfortable playing the game. That was really fun, for me at least, in Far Cry 5, and I think it's something a lot of other players enjoyed too. And it's sad to see that gone. That basically the weapon you get is the weapon you get. You want an assault rifle, you got one choice. There's more than one assault rifle, but you know, in each tier there's actually, I do believe, only one. It is a disappointing aspect. There are a few others that aren't as big as this. The weapons is my biggest complaint of this game so far. Everything else is just a learning curve. I mean, it's important to remember that this isn't Far Cry 5. This isn't a DLC to Far Cry 5. So it plays nothing like Far Cry 5, but also very much like Far Cry 5 at the same time. And I know that's kind of a weird thing to say, but it's a new game. It's Ubisoft's chance to try out some new mechanics. Some of them are good, some of them aren't. So another observation a lot of people had about the trailers was the vibrancy of this game. It seemed very loud in the colors, and a lot of people didn't think that the color scheme and how the game looked fit what a Far Cry game should be. And I'm going to be honest, I think it does. Once you're actually in-game, there are loud colors, the world is very much a vibrant place, but it works well. I was actually really surprised. The vibrancy was something that scared me a little bit, because I thought we were starting to look like Rage or another game like that, and it going post-apocalyptic. Sometimes they get into that really kind of weird stuff with the color schemes and stuff like that, and I don't think they've done that. The enemies, the highwaymen, they do have the trailer though. They do have that down. Their outposts, you know, they're blaring just absolutely loud music. Their color schemes are insanely crazy, but it's only the enemies that you face that on. It's not the regular game world. I know a lot of people talk about the flowers and stuff, and I think it works. And the reason I say that is because it looks like Hope County still, but it's different. It is definitely something new. It's not the same old thing we saw in Far Cry 5, which makes this a good change for this game. I think that they were able to put it in the same place, but make this place new and familiar at the same time. You'll notice a lot of new landmarks in the game are old landmarks in the last game, and there are even very quickly you see some old names from the last game that you'd have never questioned before. Are they coming back? I'm talking very, very small side characters that have returned, and when it clicks in your mind of who that is they're talking about, you know, if you're reading a note from that person, it feels really cool because you feel that connection back to Far Cry 5 and that memory of it, and that is a really cool aspect. They did that very well, integrating the world of an old game into something that a new game needed. It's not like a lot of games where you return to a map and you're just on the same map. It's new, but it's familiar. So that's really... So now we come to the question of, is this game worth $40? I can't answer that for you. Only you can answer that, because $40 to me can be different to $40 to you. All I can do is hopefully lead you guys in the right direction for you to come to a decision yourself. The first thing, is this game good? Yes, it is good, but it is different than Far Cry 5. Remember, two completely different games. This is a new game, and I hear a lot of people talking about, well, it's not Far Cry 5, and that's true, and it shouldn't be Far Cry 5. It's a new game. It does have its flaws. If you remember back to when Far Cry 5 came out, a lot of people thought that the way that game played had its flaws, and now we've sort of grown to it, and I think we'll grow to this game over time. It is going to be another good quality entry into the Far Cry series. I want to thank you guys for listening. Thank you all for clicking on this video. It means a lot. If you enjoyed this, I'd appreciate if you could leave a like down below. And if you enjoy Far Cry 5 or Far Cry New Dawn, go down to my channel, click on it, watch a few more videos, and hey, if you like them, go ahead and click that subscribe button so you never miss another one. Again, I really appreciate everything you guys do for me. And as always, I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day.